Welcome to another book shopping video here on the Paperback Warrior channel. This video is an offshoot of the Paperback Warrior blog and podcast where you can find hundreds of reviews, videos, and episodes about vintage paperback fiction. Take a moment to subscribe to the channel or give this video a like. Your support goes a long ways. I was recently in the Star City of the South, Roanoke, Virginia, visiting family and friends. Over the course of a few days, I hit a few stores in that area looking for paperbacks, old magazines, comics, or really anything related to books or men's adventure pop culture. The first store I visited was Too Many Books, and it's located in the old southwest portion of the city in the Grandin area. This store has actually been around for a few decades and has been in several different locations across the old southwest district of Roanoke. I walked into the store for the first time in many years and found it just as charming as ever. There's new and used books here, and the owner has a real passion for juvenile fiction. I went straight to the first section and started combing through some stacks of books. There was no real order that I could determine, just lots of books everywhere. The first thing I found was a first edition hardcover of Clive Cussler's Raise the Titanic. This is a 1976 book originally published by Viking Press here in the US. This was actually the fourth Dirk Pitt novel in the series of nautical adventure books. These novels are staples of men's action adventure literature and probably one of the most well-known. I believe this book was $10 or $15 if memory serves me. I saw this 1971 Bantam paperback book titled Dirty Harry by Philip Rock. This is, of course, the novelization of the popular Clint Eastwood movie. The store also had this Dirty Harry paperback installment. This is number 9, The Killing Connection. I've talked about this series on the channel and the blog and podcast as well. These books aren't too bad. They're spin-offs of the movie, but they're all original novels. Here's Isaac Asimov's The Currents of Space. This is a first edition from 1952, published by Doubleday in hardcover. The book is part of the author's Galactic Empire series, which later sets up the Foundation series. And here you see an installment in the Miami Vice series. These were television tie-in paperbacks from the successful NBC TV show. They were written by Stephen Grave and began publishing in 1985 by Star. There were 6 total books. Here is the debut in the Arizona Territory series. This is Guns of Arizona, published by Zebra in 1992. There were 7 books total, and you can get the first 5 from Wolfpack Publishing in ebook for about $5. The TV tie-in books continue with Kojak. Kojak was a popular CBS crime drama that ran 5 total seasons from 1973 to 1978. Now, Kojak was a New York City police lieutenant, and he was played by popular actor Telly Savalas. There were at least 19 books associated with the series, including a 9-book series written by Victor Miller and published by Pocket Books between 1974 and 75. The store had number 5, Death is Not a Passing Grave, from the Pocket Books series, but this same series was also reprinted by a British publisher called Star, and they renamed each book and had different cover art. So it's very confusing. But there was one original Star publication that wasn't a reprint and wasn't published in the United States. It was called Kojak, Marked for Murder, and the store had that book on their shelves, surprisingly. The novelizations and TV tie-ins continue with I Spy. This was an NBC espionage show that ran for 3 seasons from 1965 to 68. There were at least 8 paperback novels published featuring characters from the show. These were written by Walter Wager using the pseudonym John Tiger, and the books were published by Popular Library. The store had the second I Spy paperback titled Masterstroke. The Avengers was a widely popular British television show that aired from 1961 through 1969. The show featured a team of crime fighters led by a character named John Steed. There was also a spin-off show titled The New Avengers. Now, this show produced a ton of paperback novelizations and tie-in books. The store had several different Avenger paperbacks on their shelves, as you can see here. There was also a television tie-in paperback for Dr. Kildare. This was a Lancer paperback from 1962 based on the medical TV drama starring Richard Chamberlain and authored by Robert Ackworth. This is interesting because the medical drama television show itself was based off the books by Frederick Faust, often writing as Max Brand. He wrote at least 9 Dr. Kildare books, including this one, which was in the store. It's called Calling Dr. Kildare, and it was published in 1939. Here you can see a lot of classic hardcover books housed in protective cases. Books like The Big Sleep by Raymond Chandler, The Postman Always Rings Twice from James M. Cain, and The Maltese Falcon by Dashiell Hammett. The store had all 4 books in the Tahara series. These were published in 1933 and authored by Harold Sherman. They concerned the young son of a scientist and explorer being captured by a fierce desert tribe. He then works his way up in the tribe to be their king. Sort of reminds me of Tarzan or Bamba. I've discussed William Ross on the podcast and blog. He wrote gothic suspense paperbacks and concentrated on the Dark Shadows TV show to write tie-in novels. Too Many Books had a number of Dark Shadows books written by Ross using his pseudonym Marilyn Ross. They also had a couple of his non-Dark Shadows gothic novels there as well, and the store also had this Dark Shadows paperback authored by Stephen Rainey and Elizabeth Massey. You can see in this photo a few spines. I squeezed here between a couple of people and couldn't quite bring out every book to get photos of the covers. I can see that they had at least 2 Honey West paperbacks in here based on that old TV show. I can also see the Spawn movie novelization, and I even see some Man from Uncle paperbacks in there too. One of those spines that I did get flipped around is this Michael Avallone paperback TV tie-in of The Partridge Family. This was a musical sitcom that ran on ABC from 1970 to 1974. The book was published by Curtis Books in 1970. And here's a more detailed look at those spines, and you could even see a paperback TV tie-in for the show Family Ties, published by Avon. Also a pocketbooks novelization of King Kong by Christopher Golden. The store had Five Against Venus, a 1952 hardcover published by John C. Winston Company and authored by Philip Latham. This is a juvenile fiction novel that was part of the Winston science fiction series of 37 science fiction books published for kids. I'd like to do a feature on that series at some point in the future. Here's Black Treasure, the first Sandy Steele adventure book. This was a series of 6 novels published by Simon & Schuster in 1959. The main character, Sandy Steele, is a geologist that works for the government. He gets in adventures across the country. It looks like a lot of fun. Here's a 1930 juvenile fiction novel titled The Sky Detectives. It's about a skilled pilot and Secret Service agent and his loyal friend Gabe that embark on a chase to stop counterfeiters. This is the Steve Canyon hardcover Operation Snowflower by Milton Caniff. This is based off a comic strip that ran a remarkable 41 years between 1947 and 1988. The books were published by Grosset and Dunlap in the 1950s. The Flying Stingery is the 18th installment in the Rick Brant juvenile fiction series. This was authored by Harold Goodwin in a series he wrote between 1947 and 1968. Brant is a member of the Spindrift Foundation, which is a group of scientists that travel the world on dangerous expeditions. Brant's father runs the organization, which is based off of fictional Spindrift Island off the coast of New Jersey. At least I think it's fictional. I've never been there. Here's another Rick Brant installment, 100 Fathoms Under. This one is 1947 and number 4 in the series. Another juvenile fiction installment, Mystery of the Chinese Ring. This is part of the Biff Brewster Mystery Adventure series published by Grosset and Dunlap between 1960 to 1965. Just like Sandy Steele, Biff Brewster works for a mining company and he travels to various countries for work. The series' first few installments pop up everywhere, like this one, which is the second of the series. According to series-books.com, the hardest Biff Brewster book to find is the 8th book, Mystery of Caribbean Pearls. Be on the lookout for that one. So if we're talking about juvenile fiction on here, I'm going to pause just for a second. My trip to Roanoke, Virginia led me back to my childhood home, and I wanted to show you my little bookshelf I had when I was a kid. This bookshelf housed all of my Hardy Boys books and case files, and some other juvenile fiction that I was reading at the time, like Camp Dracula and Bones on Black Spruce Mountain. I loved Star Wars like most kids did, so I also had some action figures and stuff on here too that were related to those movies. The shelf's a little beat up, but still standing in my parents' house. Back to the store shelves, here's a bunch of Hardy Boys books. We talked about the Hardy Boys books on the recent podcast episode about the Stratemeyer Syndicate, and here's a couple of books in the Bronk Burnett series. This was a series that ran for 28 installments from 1948 through 1967. I don't know much about this series other than it features football, baseball, and sports scouting. And here's another they had as well. Here's a couple books for young girls. Here's Trixie Belden and the Secret of the Mansion. There were about 40 of these books published between 1948 to 1986. Belden is a teen detective living in the Hudson Valley area of New York. Secret of the Mansion is the first in that series. The other book here is The Brownie Scouts in the Circus, published in 1949. This isn't a Trixie Belden book, but I don't know anything about this book. Cherry Ames was a series of mysteries starring a young nurse. The series ran 27 novels between 1943 to 1968 and published by Grosset and Dunlop. Cherry Ames at Spencer is the 10th installment and published in 1949. Here's the Judy Bolton installment. This was a series of juvenile mystery stories marketed for girls, published between 1932 to 1967, although a couple were published after that date. They're similar to Nancy Drew. This is book number 5 in the series. And here's just some spines of books I talked about and a few that I didn't. And here's a 1982 anthology of Western stories, The Arbor House Treasury of Great Western Stories. This anthology includes stories by the authors Zane Grey, Mark Twain, O. Henry, Stephen Crane, and B.M. Bauer, among others. And here's a look at just a couple more Westerns that they had there. And they also had this crazy zombie anthology book there, too. So I needed to take a picture of that. A little bit of a contrast compared to the juvenile fiction they had. On to the next place, which is called Willow Tree Antiques. This is on the southern side of the city off of Route 220, just past the Walmart there. The first book I saw inside was Sparky Ames and Mary Mason of The Fairy Command. This is part of a series of books published by Whitman Publishing during World War II as, I guess you could call them propaganda pieces. There were 3 books for boys and 5 books for girls. Sparky Ames is a pilot with a ferrying squadron, and Mary's part of the Women's Auxiliary Ferrying Squadron. The 2 non-combatants are shot by enemy fire, forced to land in Brazil, and this book tells of their adventures there. And speaking of World War II, here's a Ballantine War book, sort of like the Bantam War book paperbacks. I've seen those more often than the Ballantine War books. This title is The Thousand Plane Raid, written by Ralph Barker. It was very, very loosely adapted into a film of the same name in 1965 starring Christopher George. And here's one we talked about in a podcast episode last month, a Hardy Boys installment. I think this was the second book in the series. We also talked about Nancy Drew on that episode as well. I'll confess, I actually just read the first Nancy Drew book just for fun, and it wasn't too bad. It's just a plain old mystery involving a missing will, so it was nothing out of the ordinary that you'd read from any old mystery of that time period. In that same podcast episode, we also brought up the successful The Bobbsey Twins series. You can see the store had plenty of juvenile fiction here. That was really the only types of books that they offered in this antique store. And like this one, another of the Stratemeyer Syndicate staples was Tom Swift. You could see they had a book there, Tom Swift. And just like at Too Many Books, the store also had a Bronk Burnett book there too, just for giggles. I took a photo of these cool lunch boxes. How many of you had one of these? I think I may have had this Dukes of Hazzard one, but I'll say the artwork on that A-Team lunchbox looks amazing. My last stop was this giant antique store on the southeast side of the city. The store is called Roanoke Antique Mall. It's on Orange Avenue behind the Dairy Queen. Surprisingly, this was the best stop of my book shopping experience in Roanoke. The first book I spotted was this 1939 classic Western hardcover published by Grosset and Dunlop. I've seen the book in other stores in the 1948 edition by Popular Library, but I don't see this one very often. Here you can see Robert Jordan's Conan the Destroyer paperback. This is a first edition on tour for $8. Whether that's justified or not, I really don't know. This looks fun, doesn't it? A Ballantine young adult paperback in the Find Your Fate series. These were like Choose Your Own Adventure, where you had multiple plots depending on which page you turned to in the action sequence. It's great artwork on the cover. I think this was Tim Jacobus or Jacobus. He was affiliated with a lot of the R.L. Stine books like Goosebumps. And R.L. Stine actually contributed to one of these James Bond Find Your Fate books as well. There were 4 books total in this Find Your Fate series released to promote the A View to a Kill film, which was released, I believe, in 1985. Here's a great-looking collection by Edgar Allan Poe. This is a Scholastic Library edition. It's in excellent shape. It was originally published in 1960. I meant to take a picture of the contents page. I was enthralled with the cover, which was painted by Irv Doctor. If you want to see some amazing book covers, go to irvdoctor.com and just scroll through his work. It's pretty amazing stuff. And here's Lord Jim by Joseph Conrad, published by Dell in 1965. This was originally published in magazine format from 1899 to 1900. The story was adapted into 2 or 3 films, a radio show, and even comics. Here's a Dell mapback book of Tarzan and the Lost Empire, cover by Robert Stanley. The year on it is 1951. Here's Paul Gallico's The Poseidon Adventure. This is Dell 7006, cover by M. Carter. This book spawned, I believe, 3 or 4 different film adaptations, and I'm sure there's more to come. You can see this 1958 Signet book was on the shelves. This was a movie tie-in edition featuring Paul Newman and Elizabeth Taylor there on the front cover, Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. This is a 1941 pocketbook paperback collection of Dorothy Parker short stories. I don't know much about the author, unfortunately. She was a screenwriter, poet, author. She was blacklisted by Hollywood for her far-left politics. So I don't know much about her. A Penguin paperback here, 1973, Breakfast at Tiffany's by Truman Capote. Originally published in 1948, adapted into the successful film starring Audrey Hepburn. Here's another Dell paperback, Dell D140, F. Scott Fitzgerald's This Side of Paradise, 1948 publication date with a cover by Arthur Shilstone. And here's Spycatcher, Berkeley G67, 1965. The author was an MI5 interrogator during World War II. Ironically, this book also formed the basis of the BBC TV show Spycatcher. This is graphic number 73, published in 1954. It's a Thomas Dewey paperback titled Handle with Fear. This is an installment in his Singer Bats mystery series, which I've covered on the blog, and I think we've even talked about it on the podcast. Here's another old one, Butterfield 8 by John O'Hara, published by Avon in 1946. I've heard of car clubs, but never a crash club. Crash Club, authored by Henry Gregor Felsen. It's a Bantam paperback from 1958, all about street racing. This is the 1976 Warner Books paperback edition using the movie adaptation photos as the cover. You see Robert Redford and Dustin Hoffman here. And they had these 3 Ed McBain paperbacks, $3 each. And here's another one. This same booth in this antique mall had a bunch of Fawcett Gold Medal Western paperbacks. Here's a couple of them. I'll just kind of flip through the photos here for you. It's kind of interesting that they have $2.50 on these paperbacks. And I don't see these paperbacks, all that much, whereas the Ed McBain paperbacks, pretty common. I see them everywhere. They're later editions, I think, with sort of I would consider poor covers at $3 a piece. So it doesn't make a lot of sense why they got $2.50 on these. But the store had a few paperbacks in the Star Trek series. You can see those here. I see these Gideon books all over the place as mass market paperbacks. But I've never seen one in hardcover, so it's kind of interesting to see that. Here's a couple more Westerns I found in another booth here at the Antique Mall. And here's a John Dixon Carr novel on Charter. This is a Dr. Gideon Fell mystery installment titled The Problem of the Green Capsule. This was originally published as The Black Spectacles in 1939. This is a reprinted Tarzan novel, Tarzan and the Lost Safari, using a TV tie-in, it looks like. It's a pretty damaged book, and I'm not sure what year this was published. This one seems kind of rare. It's a Western Writers of America anthology titled War Whoop and Battle Cry, edited by Brian Garfield. Publisher is Scholastic Book Services. Authors included was Luke Short, T.V. Olson, Clifton Adams, and Clay Fisher, with a 1968 publishing date. This is a juvenile fiction paperback titled Yukon Mystery. This is a 1965 publication on Scholastic. Don't know anything about this one. Looks like juvenile fiction. It's a paperback called Black Tiger at Indianapolis. I know this book was reprinted a lot with a lot of different covers. And here's an old Ellery Queen 1939 pocketbook edition. Lots of Scholastic Book Services stuff in this store. Here's another, A Journey to the Center of the Earth from 1970. Here's a great cover by the talented Ron Lesser. The book is Of All the Bloody Cheek by Frank McAuliffe, Ballantine, 1965. This is the debut of a series of hitman novels starring a fictitious assassin named Augustus Mandrell. And this video is pretty long from what I originally intended, so I'm just going to show you some of the comics and magazines the place had. I'll just kind of flip through these for us. You can see they had quite a bit of comics. And they had some of these old hot rod magazines as well. Its own section for that. It's kind of funny. My friend lives across the street from this antique mall. He loves comics. He collects comics. He says he's never even been in this place before. So I told him he should check it out. They got lots of comics. So that wraps up my video. That was my trip to Roanoke, Virginia, the Star City of the South. Hope you enjoyed the video. If so, please like it, post a comment, remember to subscribe. Check back here often for new podcast episodes, short videos, plenty of shopping videos, and collaborations with authors, publishers, booktubers. I hope to have author and editor Paul Bishop on soon, along with Greg Shepard, who owns Starkhouse Press. And I hope to have my friend Greg Watson on as well to tell us all about the world of Warcraft. We're talking about those Warcraft paperbacks that are all over the bookstores. They have cool covers. I know nothing about Warcraft, so maybe he can fill me in. And we hope to tackle H.P. Lovecraft together as well in the future. So lots to come on Paperback Warrior. Take care and enjoy whatever it is you're doing. Bye for now.